Hello everybody, just a little bit of education for you, and also we did promise that we would do this video for you. So when we released the Flower of the Month special and we used all the different Flower of the Months that we've already had, or at least 3 of them, this is the project I did. Now, since we've done this project, and I did promise at the time that we would film the actual box frame itself, or the card frame, so that's what we're going to do today. Okay, so we're going to just actually make the frame itself, but this is what you could actually end up with. So to make this, I've brought in our lovely Craftmaster 3D frames, and these could not be any easier to use. They really are so simple, and it's such an easy box frame to make that I am actually just going to make it from start to finish for you all, okay, because it's that easy. So the ones I've chosen to use are the large one and the small one. Okay, now I do know if you go on to highlightcrafts.com, these are already a bundle at a special offer. So you get all 3. So the link is in the description of the video as well. So just click on that and you'll be able to find it at the touch of a button, really. So, and also the other 2 things that I have got to make this is a background or a scene. It doesn't matter what it is. It could even be a photograph of something of your own that you've printed. And then I've created 2 apertures. Now, I've done mine on the scan and cut. You can use your own fundamentals. Now, for those of you that use a scan and cut, all I did was bring on a rectangle that was A4 in size, and my 2 apertures, one is 15 centimeters, so the black one is 15 and the white one is 14. And I brought on 2 circles, okay, mat and layered them, so group that, centralized them horizontal and vertically, group them together, and then cut those out. So that's how I've ended up with my 2 A4 frames and the apertures in the middle, or just use your fundamentals. Also, it doesn't have to be a circle. It could be an oval like I used on the original one. It could be any of your shape fundamentals. Even the scalloped edges and things would look lovely. So it's just creating an aperture. So that's what I've done. But one is about 5 mil, so we're talking a little bit smaller than the other, just so you get that offset. And then we have our frames. So like I said, what I'm going to use is these 2. So like there's a bundle, so get as many as you can, because when you start using these, it is addictive. But also you can then swap this up. So I'm actually going to do, I did a square one like this. Same for any size, it doesn't matter what you're doing, square, rectangle, but this one I'm changing it up a little bit, and I'm going to do one that's a little bit longer. So I'm going to do one that's a bit of a rectangle instead. But using all 3 of these, you don't just have to use the 2, like so. There's 2 here. So you can use the thicker one, you can do them all so they're all skinny, you can do them all so both pieces are the thicker pieces, or you can do it that the 2 front ones are so they go in steps. So there's lots of ways of being able to work this. Okay, so it's just really, once you've got the basics of how to put it together, it is super, super simple. So there are 3. I'm going to take that one away and just work with these. So how easy are these to work with is just brilliant. So I need 4 of each. You get, let me just make sure. This one's 1/2 inch, and I believe you get 3 frames. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. Yes. So you get 12 in a pack. So you can make 3 of these frames. Okay. So we'll get these out as well. And like I say, they couldn't be any easier. So they've already been pre-cut with that chamfered edge that we need, which then creates the mitered corner of the box frame. But they're already pre-scored, okay? Now, one thing that you must do when you're working with these is make sure you keep them in the right orientation. So if you start off with them all this way, make sure you work with them all that way every time. But if you prefer to work with them working on the right-hand side, that is fine. There's no right or wrong. Just make sure they all go that way. Don't work with some one way and some the other. Say you do 2 one way, like that, and you work with the other 2 that way. when you actually come to build your box, you will find you can only make 2 sides because this is facing in the wrong direction. Okay, so that's the top tip. And I like to work with them this way. So literally, we're going to fold them. And again, working in the same direction. Fold that one over. I love to use wet glue. And when this has been put to one side and it's drying, that's when we'll actually make the frame. So you'll need a little bit of wet glue, pair of scissors and a tape, or a guillotine, which is a good one to use, a pen and some 3D foam tape. So, oops, like so. Fold that over. And that is your first frame. Couldn't be any easier. Okay. And then what we're going to do is measure them. So because we're going to do a rectangle, we're going to measure and keep 2 of the sides short or shorter and 2 of them the longer edges. So what I've done there is I've put glue on that short edge and it's folded down at the first score line like this, and then fold where there's 2 score lines and it meets perfectly. Okay, what you don't want to do is put red liner tape on, hold it in midair and try and line it up. It's much easier to do it this way. So what you're trying to avoid is putting red liner tape on here, because you can use both of these. If it was something I was going to be using quite a lot of, especially when it's got the hinge on it, you might want to use it. Is you don't want to do this. Okay, don't lift it up in midair and start trying to get it to fit. Leave it down on the desk, fold it down at the first score line, only put glue on that short edge, and then fold this up to meet it. Okay, and then I rub my fingers across because I do a squiggle with the glue. This way, it's like using a spatula. That's now spreading all that glue out for me. So again, there's lots of different ways of using these as well. We are using with the, we've created a frame aperture, okay? But how about then turning it into an actual window and using our acetate, the construction acetate, and then you can either sandwich it in between the frames, the apertures, you could put a little bit of acetate in between these and sandwich it in and still have it 3D, because then having it 3D and lifting it up, even though this is acetate, you can still tuck things in and it be at the front. Then using acetate, you can then get a sentiment and have a floating sentiment on the acetate, so it looks like it's in midair. That's another way of using them. But again, it is so easy. So it's literally folds on the score lines. And then when we start measuring, and it's the same for the shorter ones, a little bit of glue on the short edge, narrower one should I say, I hold it down and fold it up to the edge, okay, and spread that glue out. So when we start measuring these, you can actually use the leftovers. So there's 2 ways of doing it. Like I'm doing it, where I'm just going to make them all up and chop them off, okay? Or if you want to make some more frames, let's say we're doing it this, say we're doing them 8 inches or something like that. This piece that's left over, you already know you're cutting an 8-inch square. So I would chop them all at 8 inches from here to here. This piece that you've left will create another little frame. So let's pretend this is my waist piece that I've just chopped off. That's just a little one. Put this on here, mark it with a pencil, cut that out yourself with scissors, and you've got a little short frame. So there's no waste to these either. They are so easy to work with. You can actually get dies that do this, but not 12 inches like these are, okay? So the versatility is then all up to you. And also having to do this just it's already scored. You literally get them out the box or the packet and start to build. So can you see again, same thing again, rinse and repeat, but again, I am keeping them all the same orientation. Don't swap them over, because I did that. I got a little bit carried away, started making a box frame. I was folding them this way and that way, not looking to where my mitered edge was. And I ended up in a little bit of a pickle where I'd only got two sides. I'd got two sides to two different boxes, so I had to make some more. Okay. And then finally the last one. But can you see how easy this is? So remember those little tips. So if you want to cut them and you know the size that you're going to cut, by all means do so, and then use the other edge as a template. Remember, you know, you don't have to use squares. We can also use them and make them into rectangles, but you can also, within reason, you can make some really super little cute boxes or box frames off of the ones that you've got left. So all of our lovely gathering dies that we've got with 2 red robins, make a smaller little frame. You could make 3 out of this, cut this into 3. Remember to do your cut off or your notches in the other pieces, and you could make a triptych, 3 different ones, which would look really super cute. So I'm just reinforcing where I've glued, and then we can just trim them all down. But before I trim them down, I'm just going to get my seam, because this is the actual bit where we can say, it's almost like fussy cutting, let's say. Okay, so we can pick the bit of the seam that we want. Then I'm going to trim the seam down, and then we'll trim the boxes to match the seam. Okay, so what I choose, which piece of this image that I want, then depicts on the size of the box I want. And remember, we're going to do a thinner one. So I definitely want this sky in this. I'm not so bothered about the base as such. Okay, so I think I'm happy there. Okay, so I am going to mark it. So I'm also marking my frame and my image at the same time. Let me use my mat. I don't have inches on here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this, because I know roughly where I want this to be, and then I'm going to make it into the proper. So that's roughly where I want it to be. I'm going to measure this, but if it's a bit less than a whole inch, I shall make it bigger or smaller, because I want to keep it in proportion. So we are not quite, that's 7.5. So these 2 pieces, top and bottom, are both going to be 6 inches. Okay, so I cut 2 to my 6-inch mark. But I want 2 of the other one as well, because these are going to sit on top, okay? So these also need to be cut to 6 inches, but only 2 of them. That's 1 and 2. And I'm keeping them all the same way, okay? So that's 2 sides, that's top and bottom. Now we want the other sides. All of this isn't going to be waste, because like I said, you can actually cut a notch in, or you can use them as your pop-ups within your cards. Okay, so there's lots of other ways of actually using some of these images. So right, let's pop that to one side just for a second. So that's my top and bottom. So use the shortest one. That's where I'm marking that. So that's where I want that to be. So now I'll bring this one in, because this is the right one. Let's say so 6. Let's do these at 8. So now all these are going to, the last 4 are all going to be cut at 8 inches. So we've created a little rectangle. So cut 4 at 6 and 4 at 8. And if you see, I'm checking making sure I have still got that to my left hand side. And then when I actually cut my scene, I've hidden one of them. I'm actually going to cut it a little bit less, so it's not quite to the edge of the frame. So it sits in quite nicely. Okay, so all of those pieces to one side. And this is the important bit now. So these are the sides. So I'm going to put them in the orientation where they need to be. And we've got our top. And then the bottom, I want to rotate round. And this one, like so. So can you see that they all go round the same way? So we've got top, top. That one's rotating. So you have to check. So on each corner, you've got a notch and a straight edge. Not in a straight, not in a straight, and they're the same all the way round. Now when I'm gluing these, I do them in 2 halves and then put them together. Putting these in, I keep that one flat and I unfold it once I've put it inside that piece. And then I use my mat to make sure I've got the alignment right. Okay, because you need your angles to fit and work properly, like so. And that's why I like using wet glue on the mitre corners. So I'm going to pop that to one side because I want that to sit and be. So I'm going to do the same thing again. Glue in our little notch to create the mitre. This is folded. I unfold it once it's inside. So it's right way up. Make sure my sides are straight. And then on my mat, I'm using that lovely right angle to one of the squares to make sure I've got this where I need it to be. And then again, let's put a little bit of glue on there because it didn't quite catch. Like so. And if you haven't got a mat, that really doesn't matter, because if you've got a stamping block or a book, as long as you've got a right angle edge, so I could even use the frame that I've already made. So it could be the pages of a book, just put it on the edge of a book, just so you make sure you get that angle square. Then exactly the same thing again, but on the bigger versions. You see how easy these are, just so easy to build. And I do the same thing again. I slide it in and then I open up the frame. Okay, like so. And then while these are actually set right in, we'll cut the aperture so it fits correctly. So we could actually be using rice papers, or you could print onto rice paper, and then to strengthen it, you could actually put some acetate behind it. By doing that, the light can come through, or you can print onto. One of the nice things that you can actually do is if you've got an image of a window, maybe off of one of your Minecraft Studio scenes, you can print that onto the acetate and sandwich that within the aperture, so it's actually a printed, almost as if it's a window. Or you may have got your alcohol inks, so you could create yourself a glass window maybe. So the permutations of using this is just brilliant. You could even make a shaker one if you wanted to. Just capture the shaker pieces with the acetate and turning it into a shaker. So they're setting and drying. So I'm quite happy just to pop them to one side for a minute. Now remember, we want it 6 by 8, but we don't want it 6 by 8. We want it that little tiny bit shorter. Okay, so let's bring this in. I'm going to line it up at 6, but I'm just going to take it over that little tiny bit more. Not by much, just a few millimetre. And I'm not really bothered that we've got this white edge on here, because we're not going to be able to see that. And then 8. But I'm going to line it up at 8 and then just take it over that tiny little bit. Okay, so that is now our frame, which our seam that's going to go to the back. And then we need to cut this down. So I'm going to line up my circles like so. Remember, it's 6 by 8, so we've got, it's not quite 8, so we need to take about 1 inch off both sides, roughly. Take that down to 7, not quite 7, we'll do 7 1/4. And the rest of it, because I need this here. And then we'll do like so, because we are actually hiding this within the frame. So that is that. This frame on top, image inside. I still might need to trim that down a little tiny bit, but it doesn't matter. And then this one is not quite 11. So if we do, take it down, what do we want this one to be? That is 11 1/4. So I'm going to do it a little bit at a time just so I make sure that I actually get it right. And this is how I would normally work it. So just going to make sure that I don't, that's 9 1/4. Pull my pieces away. And make sure I've got the right bit of my frame in the middle. Yes, I'm happy with that. I can even move it down a little bit. Lovely. Okay. And then to pop my frame on here. So I can just, I like to make sure and I have a look by eye as well. So that's one piece. Do you see how easy these are to put together? That goes on there. Just so I can have a proper look. We are going to take some of this away, but it doesn't really matter. Right, I'm happier there. So put 2 little marks where my frame is. So we'll cut those down first. You can actually stick your frame on and then use your scissors to snip them down. There's so many different ways of doing this. Cut that little bit off. Cut this little bit off. And before I do any more, I'm going to glue both frames together because that glue is now set. So that's our aperture. That's our scene. And now, same thing again as I did before. But now I'm going to do it on both edges. Okay. Have I got some on that piece? Yep. Same thing again. Flatten it out and put them together. Whoops. That's better. And I just lift it up just to make sure that I've got them right. And I do like to use again. Yeah, I'm happy. That frame's sat lovely where it needs to be. Just hold it for a second for that glue to grab. And then we're going to do the same thing again. But when you're doing these halves as such, you can actually glue both pieces at the same time. Okay, so just bend that down a little bit so that slides in. Just a little bit of a squash. Push them in at the edges like so. And then I'm just going to lay that down. And again, I'm having a little look-see. Yep, quite happy with where that is. Fabulous. Okay, so now 2 rectangles and one fits perfectly on top of the other like that. Then we're going to put the hinge in. So we can now put the scene on the back. And if I turn that over, can you see I've cut it just that slightly little bit less? But I'm not going to glue to this edge. I'm going to glue to this edge. And because I'm gluing to this edge, I've not sealed all of it down. So when you come to using your flowers, it's not sealed at this edge, so you can still tuck in. Okay, so place that on there. That's all set. Like so. And then we've got this one, but we do need a hinge. And it's really easy. I am just going to snip into one of these. So I'm going to take one of the folds off, one of the edges. Cut it in half. So I'm using the thicker one. I'm going to put a fold in there, and then I'm going to cut it at an angle. Oops. Like so, and same again on this side. There we go. Now I've got my little hinge. I've got to trim it down a little bit because of how short the frame is, but that is this piece. Okay, so pop my frame on. Have a look where the hinge needs to be. I'll work from the back because it's easier to see. Okay, little mark on there, little mark on there. Line up to the 2 marks on my guillotine. Chop that off. So that now is my hinge. Okay, ready and raring to go. So I've got my scene in the back, my 2 frames, but we just need to finish chopping into our aperture, which is like so. So what I'm now going to do is foam tape this. So it is the top and the bottom is the right size. Yes, it is. It's just the sides. So a bit of foam tape. Now, sometimes I would use on some of these my black foam tape, so it kind of disappears when you actually look at it from the side. But there's nothing stopping you going in with a marker pen and then edging the foam tape if you don't have black. Okay, because we're going to chop quite a bit of the side off on these. And take all of these off, but don't really need to take that off. Like so. So remember, go to the website, buy your bundle of your 3D frames, and you could be making these. So again, some of the other things that you can do with these, create books. So you can do this, okay, as it is. Put a book cover, put a front on it like it's a card, decorate this, put the spine cover on it, make it look like a book, and then when they open it, okay, it will then have an image on the inside again. So these can be so many. I just love working with these. I like it when we have something that's seriously versatile and just works. Okay, so now I'm happy with where I've got my placement, but again, I just need to make sure. I'm going to chop these down. I may very well end up with a gap here, but I'm not bothered about that. Put my glasses back on so I can find it. There. Oh no. Got a little bit to work with actually. That might be enough. Like so. Fabulous. Now there's 2 different ways we can do this. We can either put foam tape again on the frame to hide the frame, or we can just glue it down. Well, I'm going to opt for a wet glue method with this. And then while this is setting and sticking, we can then do with the wet glue. You've got time to give it a wiggle around too. There we go. Oh, a little bit more over. So we've now created the back and the front, which creates that lovely frame that we can now work with. Now we've got to put the hinge on. So there, like so. And I'm just going to leave that a second to set. So just a reminder, what we've used is we've used our 3D frames, and the permutations of how you do this is entirely up to you. So you can use the narrow one with the thicker one, or the narrow one and the medium, or all of the wider ones. So the frames that you get in are 3D frames to actually use this. So a bit of a shopping list for you is the 3D frames with a 1 inch, a 3/4 inch and a 1/2 inch. And if you go on to and they're all Craftmaster, so you can go on to highlightcrafts.com, either go to shop by brand, which is Craftmaster, or then just type it in, and there is a special offer on there, a bundle deal, that you get all 3 sizes to work with. So that's going to give you lots of options, because each one makes 3 frames or more if you make them smaller. So don't think of them just square. We have our rectangle. Now that is set a little bit, pop on our hinge, glue on this side as well. And I would say, don't use finger lift tape when you're using construction things like that, especially if you're going to go down the acetate route like I've suggested. Use wet glue and also your red liner tape, okay? So if I was using a piece of acetate, I would put red liner tape around it and wet glue as well, just for that added security. And I place this one on top. Just going to line it up like so, and I'm just adding a little bit of pressure on this edge. You know, now I've built this, I'm going to have to use it, aren't I? This is going to be another project that you'll see coming up, because we have got our flower of the month, which is what I actually use this with, but we've also got something a bit special coming as well, but I'm going to keep that a secret. So now, I did originally this one, which is our square, which is lovely, okay? But we've now also got this one. And just how easy are these? So obviously I've done this with the flower of the month when we did the special, but think Quirky Bird, David USBs, Minecraft Studio, all of that is going to animals from Turu. So this is going to work with anything that you've already got at home. So your flower of the month, your Quirky Birds, all of David's USBs in the studio. Stephanie's painting pages would be beautiful in this to frame it at the front. So you could even mix everything together then, and you could do a painting in the background, because Stephanie does this scene painting. If you remember, she's done the scenes. You could paint your scene in the background, then use your flower of the month and actually do the front to create this that we've done on this one. So there's so many things. These are an absolute must, and I know the deal that we've got on them at the moment is a steal. So if you can, I would definitely get a couple of these, because they are just phenomenal. So remember all of those little hints and tips that I've given you. So just that little bit of inspiration. We did promise that we'd bring it to you and show you how it is. So easy when you know how to, isn't it? And so, yeah, so a little bit of education, and we'll see you all again soon. Bye.
If you want to see more from Highlight Crafts, make sure you click the like button, subscribe by clicking the subscribe button below, and click the bell icon to receive notifications of all of our future content. You can also click here to see our latest video, or click here to see more videos like this one.